live, so that's going out. I'm going to go ahead and click record in here. Audio stream up. Go ahead and go.
You're live on the thing?
Yep.
What up, though, everybody? This is Kyle, and you are watching Knockouts in 3 Counts, and we told you we'd have a very special guest, and boy, do we. Before we get to him, Dev, why don't you throw out your social media real quick so we can hurry up and get to our guest?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Devin63. That's DEVINTHE63. You can find me on Instagram at All Steak No Sizzle. That's one word. Make sure you're checking out the Reality Era News Group on Facebook. We talk all kind of wrestling. Big topic, of course, is Becky Lynch being pregnant. So go ahead and join the group. We'll talk and join the conversation. Mr. Collison.
What a way to start. And if you guys have been watching this for any length of time, I'm Kyle. You can find me at Detroit Knockout, at Detroit NOKOUT. Make sure you're following the show at all of our social media at KO3C Pod, Twitter and Instagram, and on YouTube at Knockouts and 3 Counts. Well, without any further ado, man, we've got 4-time Emmy Award-winning TV show host, the guy who brings us all the interviews from all your favorite wrestlers. We've got Mr. Chris Van Vliet. How you doing, brother, man?
Guys, thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, man, it's our pleasure.
Man.
No, I appreciate you reaching out, and I'm always happy to talk about wrestling.
Hey, man, we're in the same boat. Even though we're doing these interviews these days, man, we're still fans, just like you, bro.
Yeah, well, look, we're all fans. Even the people in the ring, they're fans. Everybody in wrestling is, a fan of wrestling.
Well, before we get started, man, let everybody know where they can find you on all your social medias and obviously your YouTube page, which they probably already do.
It's at Chris Van Vliet, VANVLIET. That's Instagram. That's Twitter. That's Facebook. That's YouTube and my podcast as well. I like that you guys get those out of the way at the start. Everyone else does that at the end when nobody's listening anymore.
See, I figured that was probably a smarter way to do it. I mean, they probably get tired of hearing us flap our gums every week. So, I mean, I figured if I got to get it in, what is it that Brian Cage says all the time? He's Mr. Get My Shit In.
That's
you
right.
You got to get it in. Hey, man. So with that being said, you've had, quite the, resume with what you were doing with the TV show hosting and all that kind of stuff before you started doing your wrestling YouTube channel. Tell me a little bit about, was broadcasting what you always wanted to do? Or I know you trained to wrestle. So was broadcasting always the first thing or did that come first?
Yeah, broadcasting was it. It was that was number one. I remember being 4 years old, having a Fisher Price tape recorder when tapes were still a thing. And I pretended to be my favorite radio show host. And that was something I always wanted to do. And in high school, we had a communication studies class where we got to make TV every week. And I was like, this is it. This is fun. And that's what I ended up studying in university and in college. And I was just I kind of just had this idea in my mind that I didn't want to have a job that I hated going to, because there's so many people that can't even enjoy Sunday because Monday's coming up next and they got to go to a job they don't like. So that was it for me. And I knew that TV was something that I was always passionate about. And I figured if I can give this a try and fail, at least I can say I tried,
Hey, man, I can respect that because, it's funny. When we met in Chicago, that was actually our first big event. And the funny story with that is the whole reason that we even got credentials to that event was only because we interviewed Dave Silva.
Nice.
And so I was like, Dave, because Dave looked at our catalog, before we had him come on. And he's like, dude, I saw the guys you guys have had on, because it's funny. You interviewed Zicky Dice on whatever day that was. And then that Tuesday we had him on our show.
Yeah. So, well, let me look. I have it on the calendar here. I had Zicky Dice March 25th, yep. Wednesday, March 25th. Yeah.
So then that first week of April, we literally I was watching the live stream and kind of started chirping back and forth because he brought up in your interview about the Jake something thing, who happens to be a past guest of our show. And I'm like, well, what the hell? So my question for you is how, with the wrestling interviews versus what you do in your regular job with the, the TV hosting and things, is there do you see any real big differences, and how does that work schedule wise for you at this point?
Yeah. So like for anybody that's, just seeing me on YouTube, which is awesome. And like super thank you so much for that. But like my quote unquote real job is hosting a TV show. I've hosted a show in Miami for 5 years and that was like flying around the world, interviewing the biggest celebrities in the world. So to answer, the second part of your question, how do you find the time? Look, I think we find the time for the things that are important to us. We find time for the things
relate.
that, we're interested in, right? Like, how do you guys find the time to make a podcast? You carve out that time because it's important to you.
I can completely relate with that because I get that question because I work full time at the post office, man. So like,
wow,
I literally on Tuesdays when we do our show, I drive from my house to Ann Arbor, which is a good 30 minutes, then from Ann Arbor to Royal Oak, which is another 45 minutes to get there. And then, that's after working and all that. But like you said, it's funny when it's something that you love doing, it's, you make the time for that, like
always. Yeah. I mean, that old phrase is, you'll either find a way or you'll find an excuse. So for me, when I was working full time, I was hosting this show called Deco Drive in Miami, this amazing entertainment show on the Fox station there. I was like taking days off to travel to do wrestling interviews for my YouTube channel, or I would do an interview. The last interview I did with Cody right before Double or Nothing, I did that interview at a hotel in Miami and then had a change of clothes in the car. And then we went to some fancy hotel and I basically went down to my car, changed into a suit so I could look, wear a suit on TV, and then drove to work and got to work a few minutes late because I was shooting this YouTube interview with Cody.
So you always see yourself like doing that as like, bouncing between both, or could you ever see yourself kind of doing like, that, like, is it always going to be a both thing, or do you ever see yourself just doing the wrestling stuff?
I'm going to be honest. I want more. Like, I don't want to just do one thing. I want to do more and more and more. So I've been doing a little bit of acting recently. I also own a fishing company, a bass fishing company called Woo Tungsten. I want to do it all. So I think that, yeah, I'll always kind of have my toe or my foot in the wrestling world, and then I'll have some other body part, whatever it wants to be, in the other parts of the world.
Hey, you can never have too many irons in the fire. Well, Dev, I've been flapping my gums for a minute. What questions you got for our guest?
I don't know if you noticed, I had this big grin on my face right now because you mentioned Miami, which is in the state of Florida. So I always ask this question to anybody that lives in Florida, man.
Uh-oh.
Have you had any interactions with the infamous Florida man?
Oh, geez.
I knew it was coming.
Have you guys done the Florida Man challenge where you type in your birthday and then the word Florida Man?
No, I have not.
Oh, you haven't done that, Kyle?
No, I haven't, and I should with it.
Well, now you're going to have to.
Okay,
So my birthday is actually coming up in a few weeks here. It's May 19th. And I think mine was something like naked man shoots up, naked Florida man, of course, shoots up 7-Eleven. I'm like, oh, that sounds about right.
We've gotten like the funniest stories with that because we do a lot of interviews like with Evolve when they come to town. They're based out of there. So
yeah, of course.
We've gotten stories from all kinds of stories from Austin Theory talked about it with us as well. Lindsay Snow we just had on there who's based out of Florida, and just went with NWA, and you never know what you're going to get. You always get a different, different scope of it.
Florida has the best weather, I think, of any state in the entire country, but yeah, there's just some really weird things that go on there. And it's one of those things when you see a weird headline, you don't even have to ask where it's happening. You're like, oh yeah, that's totally happening in Florida.
But so nothing weird's happened to you. Like you said, it's those weird headlines where like naked guy high on PSP breaks into a zoo, starts punching flamingos or something like that, or guy walks into a grocery store with an alligator. Something like that.
Oh,
nothing weird.
Man, I wish that would happen to me. I'm trying to think of the weirdest thing that's happened to me in Florida. And oh man, I don't know. I wish I could say that I had like an alligator in my swimming pool. Actually, that wouldn't even be that weird. That'd just be like a normal day in Florida. I don't know. What a strange and interesting and also awesome place all at the same time.
So we've got a question for you in the live feed. So Jerry Vagana asked, he said, first of all, to tell you that he loves your interviews. Second of all,
Jerry.
he said to let you know, he wanted to know what's been your favorite feud so far in AEW.
Oh, that's a good one, Jerry. I think my favorite feud would have to be what has been my favorite AEW match, and that was Double or Nothing, Cody and Dustin. I was there live.
Me too.
Everybody in the whole place was crying.
There's no bell for me to ring.
I think that it's got to be that. And Cody's been. We all know that Cody's incredibly talented and very gifted both in and out of the ring. But the way that they put that storyline together, in the buildup of why we were interested in that story, and then the way they told the story in the ring. Man, it's going to be tough to beat that match, I think.
I mean, I didn't get to see it live, Dev. And so, Chris, what I was talking about with the bell, Dev has this thing he likes to do since, as you noticed, when I met you, Dev wasn't with me in Chicago. So every time I've gone to something, that we do this thing on the show where he'll ring the bell if I said I was there or something of that effect. So that's why I was like, there's no bell for me to ring. You were there for that one, and I didn't get to make the trip because I was too busy slinging the mail. But
Chris, let me ask you a question about Double or Nothing, man. I'm pretty sure were you there for All In?
Yeah, that was it for All In.
Okay, so from All In up until Double or Nothing, their first official show as a company, and up until now, like how much growth have you seen in this company that basically started off as a bet with Dave Meltzer up until now, and specifically that show Double or Nothing?
Yeah, it's a great question because, I mean, let's be honest, All In wasn't an AEW show. All In was a gigantic indie show with a lot of those same players in there. Here's the thing that I thought was so interesting about AEW. They made that announcement on January 1st, and then, news started to trickle out over the next few months about who was signed, when the events were, and all that stuff.
Oh, your mic went out. Chris, your mic went out.
How about now? Let's try.
You're good.
This is. I don't know what's wrong with this mic. I'm sorry, everyone, but at least you can still hear me.
It's because you switched from the great Samson mic that I got from watching your interview.
That is a great mic.
Yeah. This nice one here, right here in the.
Such a good mic. I have it over here. It's such a good mic. AEW had more buzz about them without even having a match, without even having a match announced, than any other wrestling company really over the last 19 years. And that's what I thought was so interesting about this. And I think that also speaks to the fact that people were super hungry for an alternative. And I know that AEW has been saying the whole time that they're not competition to WWE. And yeah, I'm with them on that. They're an alternative. They're saying you can watch that thing or you can watch this thing over here too.
Right.
So my question for you is, Jerry talked about, your favorite feud in AEW. You've gotten to work with AEW. First of all, tell me a little bit about that and how was that? And secondly, do you think we'll ever be seeing you back on AEW at all? We've seen both you and Alicia Toot there. I wouldn't mind seeing you back on AEW TV again.
Yeah, it was so cool being able to work with AEW, and be part of their inaugural broadcast on TNT. It was such an honor and a privilege to be part of that. And then, a few weeks later, I worked another episode of Dynamite. To answer your question, I don't know if I'll be back. I'd love to, but I think they've got those bases covered. But also, we're not really seeing backstage interviewers right now with the way that Dynamite's being presented. So. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm around, and if they want me, they know how to find me. But we're definitely seeing less people working on any of the wrestling shows right now, so I can't see that being a position that they're looking to fill anytime soon with whomever they fill it with.
Right. So with you being a lifelong fan and all that kind of stuff, man, do you have is there a specific interview? I always hear you say in a lot of your interviews, what's a match for somebody that, if they've never seen them before, that would be the best description of them. Do you have an interview with you being such a fan, like a favorite interview that you've gotten to do so far? And
if so, why? I mean, there's so many, right? It's like picking your favorite child, but
right.
Being a lifelong wrestling fan and really growing up and being like the hardcore fan, in the Attitude Era, The Rock was, number one for me. The Rock was the person I always looked up to, as raising the people's eyebrow and yelling, "It doesn't matter," in my high school all the time. So yeah, very nice.
Had plenty of practice.
And The Rock's everything you want him to be when you meet him. So The Rock's definitely number one on that list. And if I answer, you didn't really ask the question, but you said if there was the question that I asked, if there's a match that someone should watch if they're not familiar with this stuff, if someone wants to just see one of my interviews, I would say the interview I did with John Cena last year. I just really enjoyed that conversation. And I think we saw a side of Cena that we had never seen before. And he was just so in depth with his answers and so generous with his time. And I think that's definitely way up there on that list for me.
Hey man, I mean, you're talking about the interview where he kept kind of extending it, right?
Yeah, which was so wild because I knew he had a very tight 10-minute window. And right around the 10-minute mark, I went to wrap it up and he reaches in his pocket to grab his phone. You still got more time. I'm like, oh yeah, so we keep going. How much more time do we have? I'll let you know. And I try to wrap it up again 5 minutes later, and he's like, you got time for one more. Wow. Not only am I getting an interview with John Cena on the busiest wrestling weekend of the year, WrestleMania, but now he's giving me bonus time. I can't thank him enough for that.
We'll have the link to that in the description for you guys when you guys watch this on YouTube.
It's very
Deb, go
kind of
ahead.
you. Thank you.
No problem, man.
Well,
Deb,
you
go
mentioned you mentioned WrestleMania, and I want to get later on. I want to ask you about this year's WrestleMania, but you also mentioned that AEW is an alternative to WWE. So let's say that there's a fan out there that's watched WWE their whole life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they decide, hey, I'm gonna give this AEW thing a try. Can you describe to a fan that's been to a WrestleMania, been to all the pomp and circumstances, all the events, WrestleMania weekend? Can you compare and contrast what AEW brings with one of their pay-per-views and the star cast that usually goes along with it?
Well, I'd say that AEW it just feels more organic. It just feels like it's the hardcore fans. It feels like it's the fans that show up the Monday after WrestleMania that are there every single week. And I've always said there's a big distinction between being a wrestling fan and being a WWE fan. And it's unfortunate. There's a lot of people that watch Raw on Monday night and watch SmackDown on Friday night and have never been to an independent wrestling show or have never watched a single Impact Wrestling match. And it's just hard for me to be able to go, yeah, you're not really a wrestling fan. They're a WWE fan, and that's okay. Some people like Coke, some people like, Pepsi. But I'd say that AEW is the wrestling fans. And I think that everybody there is knowledgeable. Everyone sitting in the stands is knowledgeable about what's going on. And I think that everybody backstage is aware of that. That's why the storylines are layered, or the storylines are giving the fans something that they're looking forward to, something that they've been clamoring for a long time.
Well, you mentioned indies too. For me right now, honestly, ever since this Corona took over, to me, the best wrestling in the business right now has been in NWA Power. I was actually supposed to go to the last pay-per-view, but it got canceled, the one in Atlanta. So do you watch NWA Power? Basically, you watch everything out there. And what are your thoughts on NWA Power?
Well, I would have seen you at the NWA pay-per-view because I was supposed to be there as well. I love what they're doing. And I interviewed Billy Corgan recently, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said, the reason we're doing the studio wrestling is because we don't want to look like WWE light. And it's so true. If they were to have a smaller venue with smaller stage and smaller fireworks or whatever, anyone flicking the channel would just go, it feels like WWE, but not quite. The fact that they're completely off doing their own thing, I love it. And I love that it's the old school look and feel of what made the NWA popular and famous. And they put this new spin and this new twist on it. And man, they're really just getting started. So I'd love to be having the same conversation with you guys a year or two or three from now to see what Power ends up turning into.
Well, hey man, we're down to have you back anytime you'd like.
Well, it sounds like we'll be, a year from now, we'll talk about NWA Power then.
You heard it here first. Well, that brings a good question. So both of you guys were supposed to be at the NWA pay-per-view and all those things. So like you were saying, for all of us to do these interviews, we're all, kind of traveling all over the place. We're all kind of, getting it in where we fit in pretty much, So was there ever a time that is there any stories that stick out in particular as far as like crazy stories of trying to get somewhere or to get an interview done or anything like that? I ask because when I went to Baltimore for StarCast 4, that was one of those trips that literally everything that could have happened all at once. My boss lost my paperwork, and then 2 days beforehand, I didn't know if I was going to get to go. And then on the way back from Baltimore, we were stuck in the airport for like 12 hours waiting for the flight. Like, it was all over the place. So have you ever had any like interviews where you had like a hell of a ride to get there?
Well, I feel like a lot of the interviews have involved me either driving long distances or flying or whatever it happens to be. But one that really sticks out for me is when I did that interview with Chris Jericho last year. It's the infamous sitting in the back seat with Chris Jericho, thing. And I know I met Jericho, was introduced to Jericho through a mutual friend. So I said, hey, I see you're doing this live podcast thing in Ocala, which is like a 4-ish hour drive from where I live. I said, if you're doing that thing, could we do an interview? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I went up there, and first of all, I get to it's like a warehouse where they're doing this interview, and there's like a line of all the people that are waiting to get in. And I text Chris Jericho and I go, hey, I'm here. And he goes, I'm in the black car by the door. I'm standing next to a black car, and I'm like, doesn't look like he's in this thing. So I like tap on the window. I'm like, is Chris Jericho in there? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay. So I call him. I'm like, I'm at the black car. Where are you? He's like, I see you. Turn around. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's already like strange and weird that like, he's like, let's do the interview in the car. Cause as soon as we leave the car, the fans are going to be making lots of noise, and that won't be good for the interview. So we do this interview, and it was basically the first interview he did after signing with AEW. And I'm like, I got to get this thing online as quickly as I possibly can. So I went up there with my buddy, who's my cameraman, Daniel. He's awesome. And I said, I think you're going to have to drive back so I can start editing this interview on the 4-hour drive back. So I'm editing away, and then the computer battery starts to die. So we have to stop at some rest stations so I can plug in the computer so that we can start to export this file. Anyway, long story short, we spent the entire drive back just editing and fixing this video up, stopping at various places because my computer kept dying. Finally got home at whatever time, and then like immediately put it up. And now it's one of my most watched interviews. All worth this hassle.
Man, doing stuff like that on the fly, even again, StarCast 4, man, like when you're doing like the scrums and stuff, like it's not like there's like great internet in these places you can just, even with me bringing my laptop with me, I'm like, dude, this just is not like, when we interviewed Excalibur, man, it was funny because we went over there, and we're from Detroit too. So like we talked about a lot of things, Detroit related and stuff. And then like, it's the dumb things that happen. Like we had this guy walk, it literally in mid question, he's answering my question. If you watch the video, which the link to it's in the description, literally as he's talking, he goes, yep, and this guy's going to walk through the shot. And this guy clearly just about ate it. And I'm like, come, bro, like, you can't tell me you didn't see the guy holding, like, really? Like, right.
I got a really good one. It was Double or Nothing. We finished the press scrums, and it was like, I think it was like 9 o'clock Vegas time, but I was still definitely on East Coast time. So like midnight in my mind. And I'm like, I think we should upload these scrum interviews like as quickly as we can. Like, and they were doing like some AEW after party that, the press was invited to. And I'm like, you know what, that'd be fun. That'd be a lot of fun. I can't believe I'm saying no to this, but I want to get these interviews up as quickly as possible. So we get back to the hotel. I start editing the video together, and then I start rendering it. My computer was such a piece of garbage. And this was actually what like made me get a new computer. So I edited together whatever. The interviews were like 8-10 minutes long. And it went to start rendering, and it was going to take 51 minutes to render.
I love that.
And I was so exhausted and so tired. I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Sit here for 51 minutes? Your computer is essentially useless because it's rendering this file. So I went to sleep for 50 minutes, set my alarm for 50 minutes to then wake up as the video was done rendering, uploaded that one, started editing the next one, went to render that one. This one's going to take 45 minutes. So I go to bed for 44 minutes. Then I wake back up, upload that video, edit the next one. And I did this all night till 5 a.m.
Wow.
Dude, I can totally relate because I was doing the same thing in the hotel, but our Wi-Fi was so shitty that I kept, it was.
Oh, so it's on the plane ride home. I'm Googling what computer I can buy because the rendering was so bad. Now I've got a much better computer where that file would be rendered in like 2 minutes. But what a lesson learned that this piece of garbage is sitting right here. I should be kicking it. It's such a piece of garbage. I was editing with that thing for like a year.
Man. Well, let me ask this question. This is a question we ask a lot of, basically any guest that comes on, we ask them certain questions. But I'm going to tweak it. I'm going to tweak it for you. Usually, the question we ask wrestlers is like, "What are your locker room etiquette rules? What are some pet peeves that you have?" And we've had people answer like Hema Tornado said, "Don't bring your baby mama into the locker room. Wash your gear, just stuff like that." But you being a journalist, what are some of your pet peeves or like your etiquette rules for being a wrestling journalist that people need to know?
Good question.
Yeah, well, I'd say the washing your hair one's good. If you're standing in those scrums, you don't want to be, you don't want to be the smelly guy that has to stand next to people.
Oh my God, dude.
I would say just be respectful. And I don't just mean that in the questions that you're asking. I mean that in your etiquette, all around. I think that you can show respect to your guests by paying attention. I think you can show respect to your guests by doing your research. And these sound like such simple things, but there's so many people that don't do these things. So I think that doing your research is number one. If you want to call yourself a journalist or a broadcaster or an interviewer, you got to do your research. And I think that just treat your guest with the same respect that you would hope to be treated with yourself.
So it's funny you say that, man, because literally about 10 minutes after I met you in Chicago, my buddy's show, our buddies over at Breaking Down the Ring, they had their own booth. So they set DDP up right next to us. And he starts looking up, he starts looking down, he starts looking up. So you guys are a podcast. So you gonna interview me, bro? And I was like, bet, because I had just read his book, I had read his book, and I'm like, well, hell yeah. I'm like, the chance of me getting to interview him again are slim and none. So I'm like, hell, let's go. And it was funny because he kind of like gave me a little bit more time because he could tell that I had like, in a 10-minute interview, we talked about everything from fitness to DDP yoga and his relationship with Cody, what he's doing with AEW, the whole deal. And it was just funny because, like you said, if you don't know what you're talking about, you run out of stuff to talk about real quick.
Yeah.
Or you look like a dummy while you're doing it.
Yeah, one or the other, right? Like there's nothing, if you don't do your research and you're talking to someone, let's use DDP as an example, it would be so embarrassing to be like, so, have you ever won a championship?
Yeah, what are you up to? You doing anything interesting lately?
Yeah, you're in good shape. How do you do it?
How's your mom? So with that being said, let's get back to a little bit of a wrestling question. So I've heard you mention it before. Why, what is your all-time favorite wrestling moment, and why might it be WrestleMania 18?
No, because I was there. Yeah, so WrestleMania 18.
Ding ding.
Yeah. Rock Hogan.
So jealous.
It's the greatest match of all time. And I was there. I'm as old as WrestleMania. So I was 18 at WrestleMania 18. And the crowd was just so electric. And I went in there fully thinking I was going to cheer for The Rock because of the things I mentioned earlier and how much The Rock meant to me. But when Hogan came out and that crowd erupted, I was right along there with them. And it was, what an amazing match. And I think the thing that's so interesting now looking back on it is they had to change that match on the fly. It was supposed to be Rock, the babyface, Hogan, the heel, and they changed that within 30 seconds of hearing the crowd reaction. And still made it one of the most memorable matches, one of the best matches of all time. And I think that just speaks to how much of a pro The Rock is and how much of a pro Hulk Hogan is.
Now, had you done anything wrestling related at this point yet?
I guess officially, so this is March 18th, 2002. I had been a backyard wrestling champion. Chris Sharp was the two-time HCW champion at this point. I was a high school wrestler. So that was really it, though. And other than that, I was a fan. But it was actually that summer that I went to wrestling school for that summer, and then basically had to make the decision, like, do I continue with wrestling school or do I continue with school, college? Because you really can't do both. You know, it's too hard to be all in on both of those. And I didn't want to be 50-50 or even 80-20 or whatever would happen to be. So I decided, let's get my education, let's get my degree. Wrestling will always be there. And now I'm fortunate to be able to do a little bit of both, kind of the broadcasting side of wrestling.
So I have to tell you a funny story about WrestleMania 18, since I know that that's your favorite moment. So that year, so at the time I was 10 years old. So yeah. So yeah, Dev, I love to make you feel old. But so one of your past guests and a guy that all of us here in Michigan know real well, Rhino, my dad used to work out with him, right? So nice. For my birthday at the gym, he takes me to the gym, and you know, obviously when you see these guys on TV, they look a lot different than what you see in person most of the time. And so I walked in, and at first, being a young kid, it didn't really register, right? So I come in and sit down at the table, and he's like, and I'm just kind of not really picking up what's going on. And he's like, he whispers "Gord" to me, and I'm like, oh, then I got it. He gave me a copy of WrestleMania 18 autographed on tape before it had come out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like I met him there. And then after that, like, because our show covers wrestling and MMA, like, so we've had a lot of guys from UFC and Bellator and all that kind of stuff as well.
Nice.
And so I was still fighting actively at the time. So he would, every time I'd see him at the gym when I would work out with my dad, he'd be like, so you still doing that powder puff MMA stuff, huh? And I'm just like, damn, bro, like, why is it gotta be all that?
Wow.
So I just thought about that when we knew we were going to do the interview, because I've heard you mention that with WrestleMania.
Well, I'll show you. I have a WrestleMania poster here. That's this is one of my prized possessions. So it's WrestleMania 18, and then it's signed right here by Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
That's dope.
So next time I interview The Rock, I guess I got to ask him to sign that.
Sign the other side for you.
What's really interesting about that autograph is Hogan signs things differently based on what it is. So I got him to sign two things. He signed the Winged Eagle, which you can't see on camera, but it's in this shelf here. He signed that one as Hulk Hogan, the whole Hall of Fame thing. And then Hulkamania, and then he signs this one as Hollywood Hulk Hogan. I just think that's so cool.
Wow. That's dope though, man. Like I've got, so I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but up there in the left corner, I've got a picture. It's got Cactus Jack, Dude Love, and Mankind on there.
Oh yeah.
I met Mick in New York last year, and he signed it in blue ink over the Dude Love, yellow over the Cactus Jack, and then black over Mankind.
Oh,
so
wow.
I've kind of got something similar to that. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's funny how people do that though, because like I was gonna say, I totally understand what you mean.
But I didn't the cool thing is I didn't ask him. That was instinctively, like he sees the black bandana. Oh, I'm Hollywood Hulk Hogan on this one. NWO for life. That's what he signed on that.
So I know your first wrestling interview was Bobby Lashley, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 2007.
So if Bobby Lashley was your first, can you tell me a little bit about that? So obviously, like you said, you've been a fan for how long, and for you to do that with Lashley and that being your first one, what was it like going up to that, and what were your thoughts going into it?
So at this point, so it's 2007. I'm 2-ish years into my broadcasting career, having just worked as like a news reporter at a very small station in Ontario, Canada. I was in Peterborough, Ontario. And then I went from there to hosting this show on MTV2 Canada. So like this huge step up. And now we're interviewing musicians and we're playing video games and reviewing video games. And I was like, if we're interviewing all these celebrities and musicians, could I interview a wrestler? And they're like, yeah, sure. I said, well, SmackDown with ECW is coming in like a month. If I can like reach out and make the right contacts, would we be able to put that on our show? And my boss is like, yeah, sure, why not? So I took this, like this was my mission now. I was going to find whoever I could find that worked at WWE Canada and reach out to them and pitch this idea of we need to have a wrestler on our show. They basically wrote back and like, oh yeah, well, Bobby Lashley is doing interviews next week. We'll pencil you in. I'm like, it was that easy? Like, number one, I sold my boss on this idea. And number two, WWE's just like, sure, here's a wrestler. I can't believe this at this point. And I've met other wrestlers, at this point, but it's usually been a quick like handshake or see them at an indie show or something like that. So I'm preparing like crazy for this 10-minute interview with Bobby Lashley, who, by the way, in person is just a giant boulder of a man. He is just huge. So we do this interview, and I'm going to be honest, it didn't go that smoothly. It was okay because we edited it down for it to look okay on TV, but there were some moments I thought would go differently, or some things that they weren't awesome. But I'll never forget, the interview ends and I go to put my arm around him for a photo, and it was like putting your arm around like, I don't know, a slab of rock. Like he's just such a beast of a man. So that was how it all came to be. Kind of just me going, I have the opportunity to meet a wrestler by getting them to come on my TV show. Like, this feels like I'm cheating the system somewhere.
That's kind of how it was with the DDP thing, man. But that brings another good question, right? So like by that point, you'd already obviously been doing TV stuff. Like for us, like we've had a lot better success when it comes to like Impact or NWA or an Evolve or, something of those lines for us when it comes, or even AEW for that matter. AEW is a lot easier to work with at times. Did you have any problems like
Ring of Honor too?
Yeah, them too. They've helped us out a ton. That's how we got another past guest of your show as well, PCO, man.
Oh, he's awesome. Oh man,
he's been on our show a couple times now, man, and is it's quite the interesting interview for sure.
Yeah, he's great.
So my question with that is like, was it hard for you as you were starting to like kind of open yourself up in the wrestling world as far as interviews wise, or did your background in TV kind of like help with that?
Well, I'd say that my first bunch of interviews, so that one with Bobby Lashley was 2007. I'd say my first 5 years of interviews all happened because I was at the TV station. It was kind of like, we'll do the interview with you, because I was working wherever I was working at that time. And then I started like realizing that we were only putting like a small section of these interviews on TV, like one soundbite of these long interviews on TV. And I'm like, well, if the only thing we're going to put on TV is Raw's in town tonight, tickets start at $20. And I asked them all these questions about current storylines and how they worked their way up in the business. I was like, somebody else is going to enjoy this out there that's a wrestling fan like me. So I honestly just started posting my interviews to YouTube kind of by accident. Like I just started posting them like, another fan out here is probably going to appreciate this because I appreciated it. And that's really how it began. I started my YouTube channel in February of 2011, just posting these longer uncut versions of the interviews that never made it to TV. So I was getting most of my interviews because Raw, SmackDown, Impact, Ring of Honor, whatever was in town. They were coming to the TV station for an interview, and I just happened to be the guy. And it wasn't really until 2000. Well, I was going to WrestleManias and getting a few interviews at Access, but it wasn't really till like 2017, 18 that I was actually going out of my way, driving to independent shows and going, I've got this YouTube thing that's kind of becoming a little bit of a thing. I might as well actually like start going to like make these interviews happen myself.
Hey man, we were in the same boat, because a lot of local like guys that have started stuff up around us will ask like, how did we get some of the people that have come on with us? I said, honest to God, by going to the shows, dude.
Yeah.
Like telling them
Yeah.
like, hey, I got a show, I can help you promote, like, and that's, it's like you said, like I've heard you say, the whole vague goals gives you vague results.
I'm wearing the shirt.
You see what I did there? So I've heard you talk about that, man. And it's like, really, that's how all the stuff that we've gotten to do thus far has happened as well. But I just got a question for you in the live feed from Ben Feng. He said, what's your favorite wrestling feud of all time? I don't know if it's the Rock versus Hogan one, but that's one of the questions we just got for you.
Well, thank you, Ben. I don't know. Rock Hogan was a great match, but the build up for it wasn't that long or that big, other than, I'll never forget that promo though. You headline WrestleMania after WrestleMania. How about headlining one more WrestleMania with The Rock?
The Rock.
Awesome. Dude.
And then Hogan goes, yes. My favorite feud is McMahon and Austin, because that's what really got me hooked.
Good choice.
Late 90s. I'd always been a wrestling fan. I'd always been familiar with wrestling in the 80s. It was on at my grandparents' house, but I wasn't like a super wrestling fan until the Attitude Era. And it was actually one of my really good friends who watched every Monday religiously. And one Monday at 9 o'clock, I'm like, all right, fine, I'll watch this thing with you. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And it was McMahon, Austin, and look, what person in their normal life wouldn't want to flip, their boss off and, give them the stunner and pour beer on their face, whatever. So,
hey, I know a guy.
So I think that's one of the greatest feuds in the history of wrestling, because it made the wrestling that we're talking about now possible.
Well, that actually leads into a question I wanted to ask you. Listening to you, it sounds like you're like a year older than me, so we've been watching wrestling a long time. Has there ever been a time where you just didn't watch wrestling, where you were like, you know what, I'm not really interested in watching it? Because for me, that like 08, 09 to like 2011 time, I really wasn't watching. I just got back into it like 2012. So was it like a long period where you didn't watch wrestling?
I don't know about a long period, but I had a summer job when I was in college, and I actually lived away from home. And Monday night they were watching something else, and I just had to like kind of bite the bullet and be like, guess I'm not watching it anymore. And then after a few weeks, I was like, I think I'm okay with like just taking a little break from it. So this was 02. I got my dates wrong before. I went to wrestling school in 03. So this was the summer of 02, and I just kind of like took a little bit of a break from it. And there was also some time in like 05-ish that I wasn't watching every week. And if I didn't watch every week, it was okay. And I'll tell you what brought me back into it in 05, 06, 07 was TNA. And the X Division changed everything for me. And I was like, why can't this be on Raw every week? And the match that Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, and AJ Styles had, the only 5-star match in the history of TNA wrestling, which is mind-blowing to me. That match for me was like the pinnacle of what a wrestling match in terms of in-ring stuff could be. There was actually a point in time, 05, 06, where I was probably watching more TNA than I was WWE.
Well, see, you just opened up a can of worms.
One second for me. So we got somebody asking us to get to Chris. Gustavo Neri, past guest of our show, Dev AB. AB said he wanted to give you a shout out and say what's up to you as well. And while I'm at it, man, before I let you ask your question, Dev, Stransky, I see you in there, and it's perfect time as any. If you're in the need for a house, man, check out the homies from Stransky and Company Realty. If you need a house, they're doing them virtually. They just opened it up so you can do open houses. All the links to all their websites can be found out on our website, ko3cpod.com. You can hit them at admin at stranskyandcompany.com, 248-563-9449. Get you a house, man. Just saying. Go ahead, man. I had to take the shot there real quick.
But yeah, you kind of opened up a can of worms for me, because for like about 05 until about 08, I was pretty much watching mainly TNA, and then the whole like old WCW guys came in and kind of died it out for me. So what was it about WWE at that time that made you kind of switch over to TNA? And I know you said the X Division, but what else was it about TNA that just grabbed you during that 2-3 year period?
Well, the X Division is what grabbed me and brought me in, and that wasn't really happening in WWE. And it just harkened back for me. One of the reasons I loved watching the first hour of Nitro, because the cruiserweights were just so fantastic. And that was, I saw a lot of myself in them when I still, had these, at that point, pipe dreams of being a wrestler. But I saw a little bit of myself in them with, they were about the same size as me. And I like to think of myself as being athletic and acrobatic. And that's what they were doing. And I just didn't think what was going on in WWE was as entertaining at the time. The Rock had just left, Austin had just left. All the big stars had kind of moved on. And, we've all watched the Ruthless Aggression docuseries on the network, and it kind of explains everything that we're talking about here. The invasion angle happened and didn't really work. And I think that this had a very small opening, a sliver of an opening for something else. And TNA kind of just brought in something different. And I was just so drawn to what they were doing. AJ Styles blew me away. And I think that was another reason. It didn't matter to me who AJ was wrestling. I knew it was going to be an incredible match.
Well, for me personally, I'm a big Samoa Joe fan. Samoa Joe was kind of drew me in. But also with TNA, I think two things that they really did well was tag team wrestling, and they also did women's wrestling very, very well. And now women's wrestling is really blown up in the WWE, but we really don't give a lot of credit to those women in TNA during that time period as well. So from your standpoint, give me your thoughts about the evolution of women's wrestling from the broad panty matches you used to watch back in the day up until the TNA tag team era and all that, up until now.
Well, TNA, the knockout divisions, really, they kind of laid the groundwork for what we're seeing in wrestling all across the board right now. And I don't know if enough people give credit to what we saw there, but right. there were shades of great wrestling in WWE with Beth Phoenix, with Gail Kim, but most of the attention was on the Tori Wilsons and the Stacy Keeblers and the brawn panty matches and the gravy bowl matches. And I love where we're at now, though. I love where we're at now, where if a women's match main events WrestleMania, we can just go, oh yeah, that's the main event. We don't have to go, it's a women's match that is the main event of this show. And I think we're going to get to a point where we just we don't have to distinguish between this is a men's match and this is a women's match. I think we're going to get to a point in a few years where we're just going, oh yeah, there's that, if it's not already happening now, there's that match between these two wrestlers, and they happen to be men or they happen to be women.
It's something we brought up on the show before. We talked about, especially like 2 years ago, whenever the women would do something for the first time, they made a big thing about it. And people were saying like, we're making so much progress. And I was making a point then that the real progress is when we're not even acknowledging this anymore. And it's just really just, okay, yeah, main event is Sasha Banks versus Bayley. And we don't say this is the first time ever. This is the first ever women's battle royal. And this is that. So I'm with you. I think we're getting to that point now where it's just women's wrestling is just good wrestling. And we don't have to make a big thing out of it.
Well, I think WWE was just making up for lost time. And I think that they were going, look at all the stuff we're doing now. Look how inclusive we're being now. And, here we are, I guess it's been about 2 years, and things are great now. Like it's fairly, like we're talking about, it's gotten to a point where the progress has been made and will continue to be made. And I'm stoked for what's next.
So, and just to harken back to what you were saying about TNA, Jeff Johnson's wrestling sound off said that it was Raven that brought him into TNA.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Well, Raven's great,
Really?
but of all the people, like that's an interesting. Although the work that he did in TNA was awesome.
He had some really cool stuff in TNA, man. I remember I got to see him wrestle here at like the Taylortown Trade Center when he was still working for TNA, man. And they beat the hell out of each other all through like the Trade Center, and it was a sight to behold for sure.
They really let Raven be Raven in TNA.
They did.
They let that gimmick go wild. I loved it.
See, I would have liked to seen them kind of redo something sort of like with the Flock, because I always liked that when he first came in, but give him a Flock where he was able to do what he wanted with it. Like you said, he kind of had more of a, it was kind of let him be Raven in there. I'd have liked to seen what he could have done with a group like that in there.
Yeah. I guess unfortunately, we'll never see that.
Yeah. I mean, hey, there's a million things I'm sure wrestling fans could think of that they'd love to see.
This is true. Yeah.
Hey, if PCO was a world champion just a few months ago, Raven can have another run in TNA or Impact.
It's true.
Hey man, Chris Sabin said he might be coming back to TNA, man. I mean, damn, anybody. I mean, you never know. Or not TNA, excuse me, Impact. So that leads into a question for you though, is with all the interviews you've got done, is there anybody like that's still like, is there anybody in particular that's on the hit list for you that you want to interview? Like somebody, even if it's somebody, it could be wrestling or non-wrestling, that's something that's just an intriguing interview that you want to do.
I mean, Vince is going to be the top of my list. Not just from a wrestling standpoint, but what a brilliant businessman he is. The reason we're sitting here right now having this conversation is because Vince is a brilliant entrepreneur. And, this interview is probably not likely to happen, but I will continue putting it out into the world to hope that maybe one day it does happen. But the way that Vince's mind works is brilliant. And instead of just sitting there having a conversation about this storyline or that storyline that worked or didn't work, I'd love to have a conversation with him about his drive. Like, he has this insane drive and this incredible mindset. So Vince, for sure. Stone Cold Steve Austin's been on my list and hasn't happened. It kind of happened. I did an interview with him via satellite when I was working at the TV station I was at in Cleveland, like a 5-minute interview for the movie that he was doing at the time. It was still very cool, but I want to be able to like shake his hand, look him in the eye, like drink a beer with him. And of course, who wouldn't?
It was funny when I got to meet him in New Orleans. The first time I met him was when I was 8. So this would have been 2000. And I saw him at Autorama. And so I went to New Orleans and went and bought like the thing, one of the packs to like, go meet him or whatever. Cause that was the first time he'd done any type of
I remember
in years. Right. So apparently I didn't read the fine print, because it said in said fine print that, yeah, you could get him to sign 2 things, which he signed my belt as well, but you couldn't take a picture with him. And I'm like, what the hell? I was like, dude, I went and paid all that money and can't even take a picture. And so I'm walking through the lobby of the Sheraton, and this guy goes, yeah, I've got 5 pro photo ops left. And I'm like, dude, if I don't at least get a picture, and I haven't seen this guy in like 22 years, I'm like, I'm going to be pissed. So I walk in and he goes, I told him the story and he goes, well, damn, it's like a family reunion. So dude, he would be.
Hey Kyle, we got about 5 more minutes, man. So why don't you get your last question in there, man? And
that really was my last question, is who would be the goal interview for him. So what do you got, Dev?
Oh, well, last question for me would be, we kind of talked about your career and you getting into journalism. Right now, the world's in like a weird place right now, just period, especially in the wrestling business.
Yeah.
So first, where do you see wrestling going after this? And then how does that fit into your life, interviewing people and going to wrestling events?
Well, I think we're all chomping at the bit to at least watch wrestling on TV with a crowd. And look, I'm so grateful and so happy that Raw and SmackDown and Dynamite and also Impact are continuing to put on shows, because it gives us this tiny little sliver of what normal life used to be like. So I appreciate that. But at the same time, it doesn't feel the same. So I'm excited. I think a lot of wrestling fans are excited to see and more importantly, hear a wrestling show with fans again. But everyone keeps throwing around this term new normal. And I think there's going to be a lot of things that are going to change. I think there's going to be, I'm excited to go. I can't wait to go to a crowd and when it's safe and healthy and everything's fine. But I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be a little trepidatious at first. I think there'll be people that would have gone to shows that are now going to hold back and go, I'll wait 6 months, a year, 18 months or whatever. So I hope that wrestling's able to make the rebound that we're all hopeful that it makes. I'm hopeful that everything, the economy, sports, jobs, I hope that everything's able to make a rebound. But I think there's a real opportunity here in everything to really grow from this. And this is a really interesting time to kind of look within, find out what's important to you, find out who's important to you, who are you still keeping in touch with during this time when this is the only way we can really keep in touch with people. But I think that, we all have the opportunity to come out of this on the other side better. And I think that there's a real moment right now to kind of reflect and figure out, what are your goals? What are your goals going to be when everything's back open again? How are you going to allow this opportunity to change you for the better? So for me, I've had to adapt. I've done all my interviews in person up to this point. It's because I appreciate that style of interview better. I've had to go out and, get equipment and start doing these interviews like this. And I think that we're all trying to find ways to figure this out and pivot. And, if we have to go right, we'll figure out a way to go right. If we have to go left, we'll figure out a way to go left.
Hey, man, I think that's all we really can do at this point. Well, like he said, when they're wrapping us up, I just want to tell you thank you so much for your time, man. And once we get out of this, we're definitely going to have to bring you back on. And hopefully I'll see you around at another one of these events. And hopefully this time Dev can make the trip.
Well, thank you guys so much. This has been so much fun. Congratulations to you guys on all the success you've had. And I look forward to seeing you guys in person. And when we're allowed to, actually like being able to shake hands and high five.
Nice fist bump.
We can do that for now, the virtual fist bump.
Hey, man, well, we appreciate your time. Like I said, if you guys aren't already watching this guy, you need to be. Check him out, Chris Van Vliet on YouTube. Look, this guy's got the full list of all your favorite stars that just left WWE. You had the big Black Wednesday that just happened. Check out his interviews with Matt Cardona, Heath Miller, excuse me. You've got Hurricane. There's all kinds of good stuff up there.
Yeah, and coming up, Aiden English. I'm going to interview him this week.
Nice.
Kurt Hawkins next week, and Bully Ray is lined up. So we've got some big ones on the way. So if you are subscribed, thank you so much. You're awesome.
And throw your social media out there one more time for the
so at Chris Van Vliet, VanVliet, which I think is down there. There it is. So that's on all social media. So come say hello. It'd be great to virtually meet you.
Hey, man, like I said, it's awesome. And we've got plenty of our guests in the comments that are all saying they hope they see you around at these events one of these days too. So I just want to say again,
please come say hi if you see me.
Hey, man, I did. And look what happened. We had the interview.
Here we are.
Hey, man, we appreciate your time. Keep doing your thing on YouTube, man. Like I said, you're killing it, bro. We're trying to get like you out here, bro.
Well, don't get too good. I still got to be able to get these interviews myself.
Hey, man, we'll have a good one. Stay in touch, brother, man.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you.
Cool. Later.
Be well.
All right.
Be well.
And thank you all for watching Knockouts and 3 Counts.
Peace.
Till next time. Peace.